All right, everybody, welcome back. We are on to chapter 11 here, which we're going to make a little departure from what we've been doing previously. And we are going to look at exponential and logarithmic expressions here. We talked about exponential functions last class, or last video. And we remember that an exponential and a log function were inverses of each other. And we looked at those basically graphically, where we inputted those on our calculator and looked what the graphs look like. Well, in this chapter, we're going to look at the algebra forms of it. So instead of looking at our calculator and seeing what the graph looks like graphically, we're going to take a look and do some algebra with this stuff. And you can see it in our objectives here. The first job will be to convert between the two forms. So there must be some sort of pattern or formula that converts between exponential and log. And then what we're going to do, we're going to focus on logs themselves, and we're going to evaluate them and then solve equations. So our first step is going to be to convert. And you can see here, these are log equations, and your job will be to convert these into exponential equations. So what we need to figure out is what is the relationship between a log and an exponential. And we can fast forward a little bit. These are now exponential equations, and we would want to write them back into log equations. So this is not going to be real complicated. It's just simply a pattern. And what we can look at here on this one is in an exponent, this number right here is always called the base. And that's usually what we want to start with as far as converting. That these numbers, so in 21 the base is 18. In 22 the base is y. In 24 it's 7. And in 23 it's 18. So that base is the easiest place to start because it directly corresponds with the base of a log, which is this number right here. And that's going to be our first part of the formula. We're going to make a little formula here that log, every logarithm has a base, and that base is the number. Well, it turns out that that directly corresponds to b to an exponent, b to the x. And then it's kind of a little simpler because what we had in our log equations, once we figured out our b here, was that over here my log or my exponential, that b to the exponent was equal to something. And we're going to call it y because I already used x. And I'm actually going to change this color too. I guess I already used green, so we'll do that. Well, it turns out that these two numbers here will correspond to my log equation, but they're actually backwards. There we go. Let's get rid of this green so we can kind of see what's going on here. All right. So these are our formulas for conversion. You can see that the bases line up like so. And then the easiest way to think about it is that the x's and y's are simply reversed. And that's how we're going to convert. And actually, everything you're about to do on this and the quiz and then the test will be, do you know this conversion? So it's very important that you have this down and understand how to convert between the two, because that's exactly what we're going to do here. If I'm going to write this in exponential form, I'm going to start with the base. So in 1, I'm going to start with 20. And then I'm going to remember that that x and y in my formula right here were simply flipped. So they were simply, well, that's a u, flipped. And that's what we're doing here. Doesn't matter if it's a variable or a number, we're simply sticking it into the formula. So in number 2, I start with my base, which was a, And then I'm going to flip around these two numbers. And it's simply a way to rewrite things. We're going to get into, in a second, why we rewrite them like this. But for now, it's okay. We're just going to memorize the rewriting. So there's my base. Swap the x and y. Swap those two numbers. 11 is my base. Swap my numbers. So you can see we're really not doing a whole lot here other than memorize. In number 5, y is my base. Swap the other two values. In number 6, x is my base. Oops. Swap the other two numbers. So that's going to be converting one way, and when we fast forward, now we're going to do the other way. Now this one can be a little more complicated, I suppose, simply because we have to write out log base 18, then swap again, 5 to the n. So we have to add in the log. Again, swap these two numbers. In 22, my base is y. Then I'm going to swap those two numbers. In 23, my base is 18. Swap the two numbers. In 24, my base is 7. Swap these two numbers. So there's our conversion process, and it works fine even when it's fractions. Let's go ahead and do base of y. Well, forgot to swap them though. Like so. So there's our first objective here. Simply, can we swap between exponential and logarithmic forms? What we're going to do in a second is actually apply that, but it's important that you're able to simply have the conversion form memorized and then swap between the two forms. When we get back, we're going to use that to actually evaluate this stuff. The reason being is that if we can swap between the forms, one of the forms is often more easier to evaluate than the other. So go ahead and finish. 1 through 40 is actually just the conversion. And hopefully this will go pretty quick. If you have any questions on this, ask before you go on to the next video, because we want to be able to do this before we do the next step here. All right, so go ahead and try these, and when you're ready, click on the next video, get moving. Good luck.